What were Fred and John doing when they got a call that Herb and Ruth were coming home early from their vacation in Europe?
So Herb, do you remember anything about this?
Oh yes, very much so. And Fred has it just about right, except on a train from where we were, Austria to Rome, I got on a flat berth in the train, and I was stiff as a board in the morning. I had broken a vertebrae and couldn't move. So Ruth got out and called the police. And
yeah, meanwhile the train is still rolling.
And it was a wonderful hospital. They put a bed in so Blue Cross would pay for Ruth and fed her. And she went out every day and got a bottle of wine, and we had wine. And after a week or so, we got back, and they put a cast on me from the top of the shoulders to the hips. And they had a great big hole here in the cast. And we said, "What's that for?" And he said, "For the pasta."
So could you still sit with this thing, or was it?
No, it was stiff. It was just rigid.
Because you had to ride home on the plane.
Well, that was all right. Once I got out of it.
When did Herb's mother come to the USA?
You didn't know that.
Probably 1905, but I don't know.
Hi.
So basically, you were born in 1918, and
right.
Leo was born in 1916.
Right.
And how old? And they were probably 20 when they had Leo, or 20?
22, 20 something.
So that means that they were born in 1895 or something.
All right.
Then when did they come here? Where did she
How
come
old
from?
was she? Where did she come from?
Say again?
Where did she come from?
Where she came from. It's a good question, because I never had that much information about her early life. She lived in a poor village in Russia, and the pogrom was going on, and they were chased from town to town, and that's all I know.
And what was her whole name?
Well, Frida was her first. Frida Galley, G-A-L-L-E.
That was your last name?
Yeah.
Frida Galley.
It sounds like
Frida
Irish.
Galley. I think I don't know whether it's for Ukraine or where it came from.
Any sisters, brothers?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Oh, she had a brother. She had a brother who I've never met, who came to this country sometime, Jim, when I was a little kid. The family was not very large and not terribly gregarious. They sort of stayed together.
Where did they come to? New Jersey?
They came, my father came to Philadelphia as a 11, 12-year-old kid. And my mother, I think, came to New York also as a young girl and worked as in a knitting factory or something like that, making dresses. I don't know.
What did Herb say when he was dug out after falling headfirst in the snow while skiing?
Damn it. That's
Oh, yes.
What did dug you out was Chinese.
No, I
Tell us
remember.
what you tell
I
us.
was skiing up at Wolf Creek Pass, and it was
Where's that?
it's Colorado, and snow was very deep, and we were just cross-country skiing, and it was probably like a sinkhole, but I was skiing, and all of a sudden, plop,
Whoa.
I fell down maybe 6 feet into a hole,
Whoa.
and head down first. And I looked up, and there was a guy trying to help me get out with Chinamen. And I said, God, I've fallen through. I remember that.
Ruth, were you there?
No.
How did that?
This was when you were in Los Alamos?
Yes.
Yeah.
Late 40s. Late 40s.
Late 40s at Los
Yeah.
Alamos.
Mid-late 40s.
So did you do a lot of skiing?
Yeah, we went up, well, it was with a gang of guys who mostly went up to Leadville where the ski troops were practicing. And we were up there before there was any ski tow. And the town was like 6 houses instead of being a village.
That was Aspen.
Aspen.
Yeah.
And I could have bought the Red Onion was for sale, the big bar there. And I think they wanted $1,000, and I didn't have $1,000. Big, big bar house. We did a lot of skiing before there were ski tows.
What kind of ski were you on?
Now there's mosquitoes.
And the guys I was skiing with, I remember some of them I met later, they're all Los Alamos people. Some followed me to MIT. Clint Kelly and Walter Dyke, people like that, people who are quite good physicists. And all my peers have died. One of the problems about growing old is all the people you associated with when you were young, they all die at 85. Why, I don't know, but
You gotta
they do.
choose your friends more carefully.
Right.
So basically, about 10 years ago, you got a call from the Los Alamos Historical Department wanting to know about, because you were the president of the Los Alamos Ski Club.
Right.
And they wanted to know some history about it because they were trying to get their documentation correct.
Well, we had a small group. There was a hill behind Los Alamos, half a mile away up a miserable road. And the Army ran Los Alamos, Army something or other. And after skiing there for a year or so, I was asked we talked about it, we needed a warming hut. We needed a log cabin with a little fireplace. And so we sat down and we drew up a little sketch of a little, like a 6x6, like an outhouse almost. And I took this into the front office of the Recreation Commission of the Army. And they said, well, we'll look at it. They ended up with about a 60-foot by 60-foot house, a great big fireplace, and they fixed the road. They thought the whole thing was a good recreation facility for the time. And I'll always remember, we used to run every Sunday. We had a ski tournament. We went down to Santa Fe, and the sports shop was very helpful because that's where everybody went. And they donated a pair of skis for one weekend. Great skis.
The winner.
And for the winter of the and it was a pretty steep hill. It wasn't taken care of very well, full of stumps and stuff. Well, I went shushing right down the hill fast as I could go, and I banged a tree on the bottom. I really broke my skis, and I won a new pair.
Wow. So how many months a year did it have snow?
How many?
How many months a year was there snow?
Oh, up in the hills there, it's about 8,000 feet. We had snow probably 4 months or something like that.
Cool.
It was quite a...
You had to hike up the hill.
I had to walk up the hill
Yeah.
until they built a road, and then some people took their horses up the hill. The common. Horses were very common. My roommate was going. My roommate in a dormitory was going back, leaving Los Alamos, going to school or something. He had 2 horses. One was Sammy and one was Rosie or something. And taking care of a horse is quite a job. You have to deal with the food and the waste and so forth. And I bought them each for $1. I mean, the hazard of taking care of was more than, and I kept them just a month and I got rid of them.
You bought what?
2 horses.
2 horses I have. Well, there are a lot of nice trails around there and I used to ride them to work and park them outside. Like a car. I mean, I only lived about 4 or 5 blocks from the lab entrance.
You should bring that back.
But there was a corral there.
In Austin, there's People riding horses in the street. You can get a DUI on your horse.
You ride the horse to the lab front and put it in the corral. It was a pretty rustic world then. And anything goes. I mean, the lab was very active, very busy, and working 24, and it never closed. I mean, Saturday, Sundays you can work if you want to. So if you wanted to come to work barefoot, you could get away with it. I mean, nobody give a damn. I always remember once on the orientation tour of Los Alamos, the first day you're there, they have a program to show you where the places are. And I remember being in a car, and this guide said, "This is the married people's dorm. This is the single people's dorm. Single couple's dorm." Yeah, this is the married couple's dorm.
How many people were in Los Alamos?
How many people were in Los Alamos?
Oh, I suppose 4,000 or 3,000.
Working on the.
Well, they had families,
Oh yeah.
had a school, hospital. You know, what you end up in a place like that is cooks for the motor pool and a motor pool for the cooks. I mean, you know, they're part of the thing.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of support people. Probably 1 in 6 is working. The rest are going to kids or something. You know, the most important thing is to be associated with people who are very competent, very good people. I mean, associates, they're your boss, your leaders, people who are well respected and have a role in society that is important. Because when you really get down to it, it's the people you work with and live with that control your life. It really, you know, if the director of the lab said, you know, I want you to take a course here and I can set you up, fine. If he didn't have the clout to do that, it wouldn't happen. And anything you wanted to do was possible if you had a good team of people. I mean, anything. You can't. I can remember in the laboratory, we wanted a radar that would go around and around and around, and we wanted it like tomorrow. So we thought about how do you get something like that? Well, you get a carousel. So we went into the office and said, I want to buy a carousel quick as we can. Next day there was a carousel delivered. You can't believe it, you know. And the same with if you need an airplane or a ship to do tests, whatever you want. It's just if you run the country, you know. And here were a bunch of kids that were 25 years old. Very, very critical situation. You know, all the bright work, all the important work is done when people are 25 to 30. They have to go through school and get the background. And then, and if they happen to fall in an environment which is going places, which is developing, they get caught up in a flow and good things happen to them. You know, anybody today who's a young biophysicist who's 25 years old, gotten a degree from a good school, he's got a career, there's no question. His future is bright, he's got a big salary, he's got many options, and he'll probably go to school again, more school, you know. But if you end up in Podunk College, which has no relationship to what's going on, you end up in a different way. So it's the people you can associate with that determine your future.
Where did Herb and Ruth go to pick up wind power? I believe they went to Sweden or Denmark.
Which one?
So did you have to go to Sweden to get the boat? Or
Well,
was
it's
that-
an interesting story. We were looking for boats. I was working on U.S. Wind Power, the company that was set up. It had been going for 3 years, We're going great guns. We had 350 people in the country, in the company. Had operations in California, operations in a couple of places, and growing as fast as you could interview people. There were always good candidates, and every day you got to hire 3, bang, bang, bang. In any event, I was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it was just too much after a couple of years. And one day we went off skiing, I guess.
Walter and Susan.
Okay, and I started seeing double. And Ruth got very worried. Everybody got very worried and said, "You
All three of us.
got to go to the hospital, get checked out right away, see a doctor, because it might have been a brain problem or something major." And got to the hospital. They put me in a room, a dark room, gave me Valium. At first they did all kind of tests. Everything checked out fine. They put me in a dark room with Valium, put me to sleep. Next day I got up, they did the same thing. Couldn't find anything wrong. Gave me more Valium, put me to sleep. And after 3 days they said, there's nothing wrong with you, just overwork, knock it off. And the doctor, I always remember, he said, you have 2 options. You can do what you're doing. You might live 6 months.
Really?
You might live 6 months.
Whoa.
Or you can knock it off and relax and enjoy yourself. Well, that was a pretty strong message. So we resigned. I was vice president of engineering in this company, and doing great. And decided we were going to go sailing, and we started looking for a boat, a liveaboard cruising boat. And we looked around, couldn't find anything interesting that in America. I was busy still cleaning up work, and Ruth was looking. And we went down to Essex, Connecticut to look at it, follow up on an ad. And we looked at it, it was no way a good boat. In the yard there was a boat we liked, sitting, just shipped over from Sweden. It was up on the stand, being fitted out with instruments and stuff. And we looked at it, and they said, gee, that's a good boat. I wonder how much it costs. And we checked it out, it was $400,000. I said, oh, that's much, much too much. And next day I said, that's a great boat. I wonder how much it would cost if we went to Sweden and bought it at the factory without the shipping and the middleman and all of that. And it was like $270,000. So we said, I think we could swing that maybe. So we got on the phone and called the company, and they answered in English, which was a big help. I was afraid when I called Sweden I would have trouble. And I told them I liked this particular boat they had, and how long would it take to buy one, and what would the price really be. And the price was the same, to something. And they said, well, we're very busy, got a production line going, but we wanted one on July 1. That's the day I decided I was going to quit and get over that. They said, oh, we can't do that. We're very busy. But how about July 15th? Now, in America, when you order a boat, you have to wait a year. Here we were talking about a couple of 3 months to get the production. And they said, if you send us a 10% deposit, we'll put you on, firm up a boat. I'll give you a number. And so we went over to Sweden a week or 2 before, 2 weeks before, said we'd like to watch our boat go together. And it was 4th of July or something, and we showed up there and went into the manager's office and said, I'm so-and-so, I ordered a boat, we came over to watch it go together. And he said, he looked at a big chart and said, we don't have the hull yet. It's coming in next week. And I said, well, you made a commitment to give it to us 7, 8 days later. He said, oh, it'll be ready, don't worry. So we stood around Sweden and visited some friends that we contact. Any event, the hulls were made, the fiberglass was made in some factory down the road, and they towed the thing in a three-wheel trailer behind a truck to the factory where they put all the stuff together. It was nothing but plastic, no wood, no metal, nothing, just plastic. And we went to visit the factory. There were 7 of these in a row with big scaffolding. And they're all on three-wheel trailers, and each one was one day ahead of the other. And we said, well, our boat will show up, whatever day it was, Thursday. We'll be there Thursday morning to watch it go together. We show up Thursday morning. We couldn't get on the boat. There were 11 men working on it. They ran it like the Ford production line. Every single people were putting on the rudder, what people putting on the railings, people painting, people this, and so well organized. And we started to see how they did it. They had a whole string of garages. They looked like garages. Each one had a boat number on it. Boat number 52, 53, 54. And there was a list of parts on the door of the garage. It must have had 5,000 parts. Every bolt, every screw, every belt, everything, all listed. And somebody in the stock department had the responsibility to be sure on a certain date that every one of those blanks was checked off. So that when the right time came, the whole thing was ready to make a boat out of it. That isn't the way it works in America.
Now they've turned that factory into IKEA.
How-
Now it's IKEA.
In any event, the boat was ready on the right day. In fact, the day before, they called me in and said, we're sorry, the boat will not be ready tomorrow morning. And because the way the contract was written, I could have canceled it at no expense. And I said, when will it be ready? He said, about 12. Now, we have friends who order boats in America. They're supposed to be ready in July. About November, they show up.
So how old were you when you left the company? How old were you?
63.
Yeah, something like that. And that was the best thing we ever did, because
Here he is.
well, I'm here only because of Ruth, because she takes care of me. She feeds me the right food, the right time. So that was. So I don't know how we got into this question, but that's Sweden. How to get to Sweden?
So Herbie, who was Achilles?
Well, he was a graduate student. Every year we had the habit of contacting the foreign student office and say we'd like us. Once John wanted, it was playing basketball, playing.
He wanted the African.
He wanted an African person, so we found that. We wrote a note saying we'd like an African guy who plays soccer. And here comes this, they pick it and send him. We met him at the airport and take him home, and first week or two help him get set up. And he was 6'6" tall.
On pole.
You got this letter
From
from
where?
saying,
Mozambique.
I am not a typical African.
And that was a very interesting thing. You know, that reminds me of something else, which is, I was taking, I don't know, Walter or one of the boys to the airport to catch a plane. And as I was walking back to my car, there were 3 Japanese sailors.
It was John you were taking to the
John,
bus
okay.
station.
And they had military uniforms on. They were over to the U.S. on some sort of exchange training. They're going down to Newport, Rhode Island. But it was a weekend and they had a day or two. So out of the blue, one of these kids walked over to me and said, could you take me home? Just like that. I hadn't seen him, hadn't known him. And I said, why not? I called Ruth. Said, I've got a couple of guests for breakfast. So these 3 young guys who spoke very, very poor English, hardly, you could kind of make it out, but, well, we got home to our house and they liked it, and so what, we fed them breakfast. They didn't know what to do with knives and forks.
Or bacon and eggs.
Or bacon.
was in the 60s.
If they didn't use chopsticks, they couldn't understand them. In any event, we wanted to take some pictures outside in the yard, and they said, can't go outside without my hat on. They were very rigid, you know. If we were going to go outside, they had to they put their white cap on and stand. And the other thing I said, you're going to Newport for training. What are you trying to do? What's your goal? And he shockingly said, kill Americans. These kids were brought up after Pearl Harbor, after the Japanese surrender, and they obviously did not like Americans. I mean, personally, they had a very limited view of the world. But they were going to Newport to learn how to kill Americans.
Okay, what work did Herb do at Kwajalein Atoll? Kwajalein Atoll? No, I don't think that's Bikini Atoll.
No, that's different.
You worked at the Atoll booth. My final answer.
A quarter to give. Well, one of the problems you run into when you have both the Air Force developing missiles and the Navy developing missiles, each one wants to say, I do a better job than you do. You know, my interceptor can intercept your missile. You know, and it's a big battle for money. They all want extra support, and they say, well, we're doing this wonderful job, and we can do this better than the other guys do. So the laboratory got dragged, this is the Lincoln Laboratory, got dragged into the problem of being a neutral empire. And how do you evaluate this? You've got to do tests. Now, where do you do the tests with missiles? Not in Massachusetts. And it turned out that there had been some previous work deciding that if you shoot missiles out of California, where they had a military defense set up, you fire them into Kwajalein or nearby, and then at Kwajalein you have optical systems and radar systems and IR systems and airplanes with equipment to evaluate not only where it went, but did the interceptor work. And that goes on day after day, week after week. It goes continuous effort. You don't hear much about it because it's all secret. Not that secret because the Russian ships are sitting out there watching too. And but the laboratory had the role. So they asked the laboratory, how do you build a measurement radar that would do better than the present stuff? And I was working on that at Lincoln. I ran the radar division. So we had some radars, and then you got to bring them out in the field. And we had a whole contingent of maybe 30 scientists, engineers, with their families out there. They go out for 2 years and come back. And so that's what we're doing. It was an evaluation program. And it's very difficult to be the arbitrator when you've got the Army and the Navy pushing each other, you know. They say, well, that wasn't right, that wasn't right. You got to be a referee, impartial. So you got to be technically correct. And that's a big job. Now, interesting enough, little by little in the last decade or so, more and more of the operational instruments have been operated automatically. And the people are back home in the laboratory looking at the instruments. You can they can measure, make all the measurements sitting back, not all, but with computers and processors. Instead of doing it out there, you bring it all home. So instead of having maybe 30 scientists there, you've got maybe 4, and the rest of the people are busy home.
So what years was that?
35 years ago, count backwards, 40 years
More than
ago,
that.
40 years ago.
Probably was in the 50s, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
50s, yeah, 55, something like
Yeah,
that.
it's 55 years ago.
Where did Herb go to build radars for the dew line? This is something that I would have known 8 years ago, but I don't remember anymore.
Well, there was I don't know how deep to get into this, but back when the hydrogen bomb was in the Soviet hands, a great concern about a surprise attack on American defense forces. The principal defense forces we have were the B-52 bombers, which carried nuclear weapons. We had about 30 of those that were kept on ready alert. That meant the crew was always within 20 minutes of the airplane. In fact, he lived in trailers nearby and rotated and all of that. Very great concern, because that if the Soviets could launch an attack and get rid of the B-52s, we had no defense. There literally no defense. They could send over a pilot cub with a BB shooter and go get right through. So the concern is getting warning, getting early warning. And early enough so that if there was an imminent attack, you could get the B-52s off the ground. And you probably don't know, but there was a period of maybe 3 years where the Air Force kept a 3-star general up in the air in a B-52 in a control aircraft, circulating around in an unknown area, but they had the command and control responsibility. So he could launch an attack.
At all times.
And the Soviets knew that. And because of that, it was a propaganda deterrent. I mean, they wouldn't want an attack if they couldn't defeat the forces. So a lot of this, in retrospect, it looks kind of, why the hell did you do that sort of thing? But there was a great anxiety because the Soviets and the U.S. didn't trust each other. People on the street didn't appreciate that. But the scientists did. They knew how they were building submarines and they were testing torpedoes and doing things which the man in the street didn't know. And there was very little technological difference between the two countries. I mean, we might be ahead of them in one area and they were ahead of us in something else. So great anxiety about watching what they're doing, understanding what they're doing. Well, out of that came the need for some early warning radars. So a group was convened at MIT, consisting mostly of Bell Lab people, MIT people, and a few other people in the Defense Department, to say, what do you do about air defense? How can you get warning so the air defense system isn't caught by surprise? And they decided the most likely attack was aircraft. At that time, there were no missiles of any capability. And how would an airplane go from the Soviet Union to the U.S.? The shortest way by far is over the pole. There's no other direct route that's anywhere near that. And that was just on the edge of what a big aircraft could do at that time. So you needed some warning systems up in as far north as you could get them in the Arctic, so that if they detected an incoming raid, you could alert the U.S. And so that was sort of the big challenge that first came to the foundation of Lincoln Laboratory, continental air defense. And of course you needed some kind of warning equipment, and radar was the problem. So how do you take, the Arctic at that time was very primitive. No airfields, no roads, no transportation, no fuel supply. So this group that working on Memorial Drive up in the Lever building cooked up a scheme where we put a series of radars 30 miles apart, 50 miles apart along the Arctic. And there were 39 radars that went from Alaska all the way across to Iceland. And I was given a job of putting the radars together, designing and figuring. And very interesting and exciting activities. It wasn't the fact that it was a problem, but they want it next month.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and the president, I really mean the president, went to Bell Laboratories or to Western Electric and said, I want 6,000 people at work on this project next week. Don't tell me you can't do it. Next week, stop anything. It's national priority number one. And so they had to build. You go up in the Arctic, you have to ship oil because you have to run the heating systems in the house. You have to build a dock in the Arctic. You have to transport all of that stuff during the summer months. You got a 4-month window to bring up enough, and all the houses and all the food and all the rest of it. Tremendous logistic job. The Western Electric Company was chosen because they were the telephone company. They had AT&T at that time. That was a support group. And they could pull 6,000 people off the job tomorrow. They had the people working. Nobody else had it, really. And they had, you know, design people and construction people. Well, the whole thing went along very, just on schedule. It was one of these things. Sort of 18 months later, we had a network of radars running. Then they had the problem of getting the signals from the north to Colorado Springs, which was another technical, microwave communication links and all of that. And Lincoln Laboratory started at the same time frame almost, and probably 18 months later, we probably had 1,000 people working. I mean, all we could defend is the northern reaches where we controlled property, and all they could launch from is their area. It's hard to think of how paranoid we were, but there was evidence that they were building bombers, they were building bombs, they were building training people, they were doing everything we were trying to do, and in some cases they did a lot better. Yeah? And 10 years later, when we visited the Soviet Union, we still saw evidence of that. I mean, they locked us up in a room and they kept us for hours while they looked through our luggage, and you know, you can't believe how.
Even in 1970, when I was there.
But we didn't have nasty feelings. We didn't feel anti-Russian, but we were worried. But we were worried about could you trust them? You know, I may have told you the story about we were in a hotel room and we were told it was going to be bugged. Everything we said was going to be down on tape recorders, so be cautious about what you say. Well, there's a story about the two CIA guys who were sent to Russia to do something under diplomatic cover. They ended up in a hotel room, and they said, we know the room is bugged, and here we are professionals. You know, we should be able to understand what they're doing. So they looked in every telephone, every electric socket, under every couch, looking for a bug. They spent the whole day trying to figure out how their room was bugged. And they had a parquet floor, and the guy was tapping all the tiles. And he hit a hollow one. And they took the penknife and they pried it up, and sure enough, there's a bunch of wires there. So the guy took his penknife and he cut the wires. One, bang, 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 bang. 10 minutes later, knock on the door. The manager came up and said, what's going on? The chandelier fell downstairs. But it was really peculiar. We had cockroaches in the bathroom. And we called and asked for, someone to come and take care of the cockroaches. That doesn't happen in America, you say, And nothing happened. And Ruth stood in the middle of the room and said, this couldn't happen in America. There are cockroaches in the bathroom. 5 minutes later, comes a lady, comes up with a spray. I mean, you can't imagine how I walk down the street and every half a block someone would stop me and want to buy my necktie. It was as long as I didn't sell anything, it was okay. If I tried to get involved with it, then
How many times did Herb fly from Boston to England during World War II? How long did the trip take?
Flying back. Swam back at least twice, I think. I reckon 3 times.
How long did it take?
10 hours.
well, you're about right on trips. I'm not sure how many, but the timing. When you flew from Boston, my first trip from Boston to England, the plane went from, the first flight I went from Washington to Limestone, Maine to Greenland, Greenland to Iceland, Iceland to Scotland, and Scotland to London. And that was as far as the plane could fly. I mean, these were big Air Force airplanes, and you get in the air 4 hours, they run out of gas. And so it took essentially 24 hours to make the trip, and maybe a little bit longer.
Did you ever go to Newfoundland or Gander? Did you ever stop in Gander? Or was that not
Yeah, that was Gander, Newfoundland was one. I remember being kissed by the Soviet ambassador to Gander. We came down to Gander. We landed late at night, midnight, a snowy field, and the plane we were on was run by a general who was in charge of the support for the bases. He was making a routine trip, and he provided the steak, and he provided the blankets, and he provided the food and the trucks and the rest of it. So the commanders of the bases were very eager to see him. And we landed at 2 o'clock in the morning, and here comes his entourage of military vehicles, maybe 8 of them out, with all the officials of the base, including the Soviet ambassador. And as we came down the runway was a ladder going down. The Soviet ambassador kissed everybody.
How old was Herb when he went to England in World War II?
Ooh. Remember?
So I asked him, he said he was 22.
That's right, yeah.
Is that right? Were you, how old were you when you went to England?
I think I was 22.
What was Herb eating on a bus in England that provoked stares during World War II? Well, everything was rationed during World War II, so it might not even have been that it was such an unusual thing. It just.
You remember this story, Herbie?
Herbie, what were you?
This story.
Well, I'm not sure. Aside from the Brussels sprouts, which I didn't like. Cabbage and Brussels sprouts in England, day after day after day after day. But I do remember one thing. The first time I drove a car into London, I hadn't eaten, it had just arrived shortly before, and I was very hungry, and there was a vendor there selling fruit, grapes, and I looked at him and said, I'd like some of those grapes. In England during the war, grapes were a rarity. They were scarce, very expensive. They almost counted the grapes when they sold them $1 a piece or something. And I, not knowing any better, and just having come over from America, said I'd like, a pound of those, or half a pound of those. That was unheard of. I mean, no one could ever buy a pound of grapes in England. They cost $40 or something like that. Whoa. And the British had no money. It was an austerity room. And so I got this big bag of grapes. And the people I was with were astounded. I didn't appreciate the difference at that time. I had American dollars in my pocket.
Yeah.
And so I paid $10 for some grapes or something.
That reminds me of your story about the Officers Club in London. Is that in here?
Go ahead.
Well, a very good friend of mine in MIT, who was the British liaison officer, was sent from England to be at the lab. British Technical Liaison Officer, Dennis Robinson, Dr. Robinson. And walking down the street one day, I met him in the street and said, I'm going to lunch, would you like to come with me? And I had access to the officers club. And he hadn't eaten a good meal for 2 weeks as far as I could tell. I mean, the officers club had food. It was like an American Army camp. You went everything you could think of. And he hadn't seen a good piece of meat in weeks. So I took him here as high official in the British scientific world who didn't have enough, really didn't have anything except, beans and cauliflower. And he always reminded me, whenever I met him, about how I invited him to the officers club in London.
Did you catch any flack from the other officers? Did they care?
Oh, no. I was fully accredited.
I thought they almost didn't let you in at the door. That's when you were 22.
Well, if I show my papers, they say, yes, sir. So it was always common. I was just a kid. And I would come to this entry post on a military base, and I want to go in and see the commander or the technical guy or some engineering department. And as I drove my vehicle, which frequently was an ambulance, because that's what they had lots of before the war, go to the motor pool to check out a vehicle. Couldn't find a sedan, but had 300 ambulances there.
Whoa.
So you check out an ambulance. And I drive up to the little outpost at the gate, and the soldier who there was lounging, and I handed him my papers. He said, yes, sir, yes, sir. Because I was the same rank as the commander of his base.
Whoa.
So.
What award did they give him?
You might know.
Don't look around, because you were going to answer it, or we will go for it.
What I think, wait, the question was, what association did you join growing up? But you shouldn't answer yet. And what award did they give you?
The answer is the Boy Scouts.
Oh.
I remember I became an Eagle Scout at the age of 13 or something. And the local men's club, I don't know whether it was a Rotary Club or some group invited me. They picked me to come and talk to them during their nightly meeting. So I showed up at wherever they were, and they had the usual stuff, and then they invited me to tell them about the Boy Scouts. And I was, I couldn't say anything. I really was speechless. And I stood there for a while, and I sat down and ran out of the room. I didn't do a good job.
What was the name of the first sailboat our family rented to cruise around New England, and what year did we rent it?
Long time ago.
1960.
Long time ago.
So Herbie, what was this boat? What's the
It was
right
a little 32-foot Chris Craft sailboat. It had
Wooden.
wall-to-wall wet carpeting.
Wouldn't
And
What was it called?
what was the name?
Shanty.
Shanty.
Why did Herb make Walter crawl through a parking lot at Lincoln Labs?
Oh, yes. The Vietnam War was on. And there was the Vietnam were hiding behind the bushes, 50 feet from a little military outpost, and firing at the military outpost. So pressure was, you need a radar that could see people behind bushes, where the bushes didn't block the signal. It took some special kind of processing. And we put one of these together, and we were testing it.
Before infrared, basically.
Yeah, the bushes and he was a
Tell a
target.
story about what happened, the big accident in the Caribbean when you actually did come from Europe.
Well, we were sailing back from the Caribbean, and Ruth and I, as usual, we're usually the only two people on the boat. And we were up near an island called the south of Bahamas by 400 miles, north of,
It's in the outlying Bahamas.
yeah.
And we had,
What's the name of that island?
we hadn't checked in yet because we hadn't come to a real port where you could check in yet.
Yeah. In any event, we were sailing along on a fairly reasonable, nice day, and Ruth was at the helm, and
We were
I was,
sailing from the Turks and Caicos to the Bahamas.
yeah. And for some reason or other, well, we tacked, she tacked, and
Because it was a winter.
a fitting up on top of the mast go. Little metal fitting.
Like a bolt or what?
Yeah, a little, it kept on vibrating one way or another over the years, and the metal fatigued, and that was supporting the back of the mast. And the mast came down, broke at the middle, at the spreaders, and the wind was pretty good. It was up to 15, 20 knots, and we about 500 feet from the shore was a rocky reef and lots of waves breaking. It was all white water, and I crawled up front and dropped an anchor, which must have caught on a ledge, because even though the boat was doing this, we held very well. And so here we were sitting on the edge of a reef, 20-knot winds blowing us into the reef, but bouncing away. And we had 2 other anchors on board, and we dropped them at the same place. Of course, they went straight down. They weren't doing any good, but if we pulled back, it would. In any event, so here we are. The sail was in the water. The top half of the mast was in the water, and all the wires that support it were in the water. Well,
Let me interrupt to say that Herb was down below, I was up above, and instinctively, I always do the wrong thing. And when all this happened, I started the engine.
which
It
was,
was a big mistake because we had all these lines in the water, and they immediately wrapped around the propeller, so we had no engine.
Whoa.
And that's why we had to rush up and anchor.
so little by little, we started putting all the broken stuff, dragging it on board and tying it up so it didn't bang against
Did you
the
drag
boat.
a sail full of water?
Yeah, the sail was full of water.
Yeah.
Dragged it back little by little, and trying to get everything tidied up on the boat. But here we were, bouncing away. We weren't going anywhere, but there was we could see a shore, but no, unpopulated. It was just nobody around, no houses, no nothing. So, got on the radio, and I had a ham radio, and I put in a call, a Mayday call, and here comes somebody in Wisconsin who came back, and I told him where I was and what the problem was, and could he get me in touch with the both the Weather Bureau to find out what the winds were going to do, and also the Air Sea Rescue people.
Air Sea Rescue.
Bahama, and all tuned up to my ham radio frequency. And so I could sit on the boat and talk to them. They were 400 miles away or more. And Miami was the people I was talking to. Coast Guard said, well, you're halfway between Puerto Rico, which is 450 miles away, and Miami, which is 450 miles away. Those are the 2 places where we have support. And if your life is in danger, we can send an airplane over to drop a raft. Well, it wouldn't do us any good because we already had a life raft on board which we couldn't use. And we wanted to get towed off. So all day long, the Weather Bureau, which came up on frequency, said that we don't see any change for the next 2 or 3 days. It's going to be blowing 20 knots and same thing from the east. So every 2 hours or 3 hours, I'd get on the radio and put out a mayday, hoping some ship would come by offshore. And finally, after the second day, nothing happened day after day. Meantime, we couldn't eat because there was so much bouncing we couldn't keep food down. Ruth would cook something and then half it would fall out of the cup and the other half we'd take in and we'd throw up right away. And one day I got a hold of a tanker carrying oil from Venezuela going up to New York or someplace. And the captain of the tanker got on the radio and said, told me exactly where I was, and I put out some flares. He couldn't see them. He was 20 miles away or 15 miles away. And he said, it's too dangerous for me to put a lifeboat out with people in that weather. He says, I could stand by and see if I could help you with the radio problem, but no. So on the third day, we got the bright idea of calling a guy we knew down in Turks and Caicos. And this guy, I think he was a drug runner, I don't know.
I'm sure he was.
And he had an airplane and a boat. And I got a call into the police station down in Turks and Caicos.
I've heard about
And they found him in a bar somewhere. Yeah. And he said, well, I'll be up tomorrow with my plane. He says, I'll bring the cutter tools and we can get down free of propeller. So next morning, sure enough, he was supposed to show up at daylight, but about 9 o'clock he finally showed up. We saw a little plane fly around. He went right by us, didn't see us, went back, didn't see us. The boat was white and blue, and the ocean was all churned up with blue sea and the white waves. That little spot in the water isn't very big. Finally, on the third pass, just as he was giving up, he did see us. And we didn't have the right radio frequencies. He couldn't talk to him directly, but he wagged his wings and he went to shore. And I learned later that they landed the plane on a road, no airport there. And they found, there's supposed to have been a boat on the island that could come and help pull us off. Well, we waited and we waited and waited just toward the end of the day, after waiting 6 or 8 hours for something to happen. Meantime, we're doing this all the time. Here comes this rowboat. It was a little bigger than a rowboat, a little tiny outboard boat with 3 guys on shore. And there was a black preacher who owned the boat and 2 others. And meantime, I looked at them in the waves, and I was afraid they were going to sink, capsize. It was terrible. And they finally got close enough we could yell at each other. And they said, jump aboard, we'll take you back to shore. Well, that wasn't the thing we didn't particularly want. We wanted to get off the boat, but we didn't want to leave it. And lo and behold, because I had to keep the batteries charged, I could turn on the engine, but I couldn't put it in gear. So I could charge the batteries periodically. And every once in a while I would go forward and back to try to get the wires free. Lo and behold, just as they were nearby, the wires were clear. They must have just shaken off. And we yelled to them that if they could lead us through the reef, we could follow them around the back of the island, which they succeeded in doing. And it took us a long time to get through the breaking sea. For a long time we were going backwards and backwards. And maybe after half an hour, 3/4 an hour, we got far enough from land so it flattened out a bit. We were around the back of the island. They led us through a narrow cut. Well, in any event, after the third day, we got around the back of the island. Things were quiet and flat. And here we were in the boat. The preacher and the guy in the little boat had to go back because they ran out of fuel. And in fact, we got them aboard and gave them a drink in it because they had as bad a time as we did for a while. And okay, So we tried to figure out how to jury rig the remainder of the sail so we could do something, move. We went to sleep for a whole day. Took us that long before we could. And then here was this stub of a mast, and we tried throwing lines over, pushing it up with a pole, doing everything up. Finally, after many, many tries, we could get a line up on top, and we put a block up there and hold up the top half of the sail part with, and we had a mizzen sail, so we had an engine. We progressed from there and went all the way back to Bahamas and then back to Miami, to Fort Lauderdale, I guess.
Wow.
And meantime, on the radio, it's wonderful. The radio is like the internet. You put out I want a new mast, I'm looking for a mast this size, this diameter, this height. And we got the word that the nearest one was in Tampa, Florida. Tampa, Florida is about 200 miles north of Fort Lauderdale. We got to this yard where you could get stuff done, and we're looking for some way to get up to Tampa to get this mast. This mast was fortunately cut in two pieces with a sleeve, which allowed you to hook them together so that you could make a long mast out of it. We checked. It turned out there was a station wagon in the parking lot, an old beat-up station wagon with a flat tire. And the owner of the wagon said, if you buy me a new tire, you can borrow the wagon. So we called the state police about how long a thing can we put on the roof of the station wagon and run on a highway. Well, they told us we could, if we sail only in daylight, if we motor only in daylight and put a red flag on the back, it could be 35 feet or some number like that. So we made a deal, and we went from nonstop from Fort Lauderdale, 200 miles up there. The mast was waiting for us. Put it back on top of the car. It's the only time we've eaten in McDonald's 8 times in a row.
You didn't do the drive-through though.
Yeah.
Well, we got it back. We got the boat.
Yeah.
We got it all together again, and everything is
So
fine.
Herbie, why don't you just tell the story of your meeting Ruth and proposing to her?
Well, Ruth can tell that better, but we met in Cambridge. I was living right by the law school on Everett Street in an apartment with a couple of guys. And one of my friends nearby invited me to a party. And Ruth showed up at the same party. And we talked briefly, and I said, I'd like to see you again. She gave me her phone number, but she was very busy and I was very busy. And we both called a couple times and neither of us could find a date where we both were free. And finally, I called one day and she said, I have a friend getting married in Quincy or someplace like that. Said, if you could take me to Quincy, after the wedding, I'll go out with you. So I picked her up in my car, which was an old Buick, and we went to the wedding and went through the reception line, and I said to Ruth, weddings are kind of fun. Why don't we get married? And she said, I'll let you know tomorrow. Sure enough, I called. She said, sure. We'd known each other about, once before, and then this time, second event, second time.
Yeah.
What musical instrument did Herb play when he was a boy?
Piano.
You're right.
Violin.
The piano and the violin, later on the violin.
Oh, nice.
They were both right.
And then later on,
I never played them very well.
Herbie,
so it didn't stick.
later on you played the
Flute.
The flute.
I remember that.
What was the car the family bought when they went to Germany in the mid-1960s? What did Ruth make custom for this car? How large was the engine? How much did it cost? If it was in mint condition, what would it be worth? This is a lot of questions.
Any one right answer.
The whole pile. You can wrap up the game right now.
Well,
I don't know.
I don't remember exactly. I remember that we were going to buy a Volkswagen convertible,
Right.
and we were going mountain hiking. And everybody had a backpack, a little pack, and boots. And the problem was all 5 of us get into this VW convertible. All the stuff.
Right.
So everybody had to pack up his stuff, and we did a trial pack. We borrowed a Volkswagen from, I guess, Jack Roby, and brought it home, and everybody packed their stuff. And we got a little carrier on the trunk to hold it. And managed to get everybody to fit in it. It was very tight, but every corner was packed. Worked out fine.
Why did a chauffeured limo pick up the Weiss family at Heathrow when they went to Europe in 1964, and where did it take them?
We went to, I contacted my friend in England who was the nearest, the guy I worked with closest, and he at that time was president of the largest electronic company in England. I forget what was
General Electric of England.
one of those, I don't know. And he immediately sent me a wire, invited us to dinner, and he said, I'll have my car meet you at the airport. And at the airport, we arrived, no, we came up from the ferry. He met us at the ferry stop from France.
No, we went further.
He met us.
Flew in.
We flew.
All right, we flew in. In any event, here comes this Rolls Royce with a chauffeur driver, uniform and hat and all that. And they took us back to the office of the company, took us up to the top floor, and they had a big spread lunch for us.
Wow.
With 5 or 6 waitresses in white caps running around. After that, we had a tight schedule. We were due only 2 hours later to get back to the airport. He said, well, what would you like to do in that period? And well, we ought to see Westminster Abbey, we ought to see
Buckingham Palace.
So here we drive up to the Buckingham Palace where the guards are all there. And with his Rolls Royce, he parked right in front, and they salute him.
They moved? They're not supposed to move.
He was one of the leaders of the country.
Wow.
And so we did a whirlwind trip, 4 or 5 scenic places, and then the airport, and driven around.
All the
in
boys?
a chauffeured Rolls, a great big car, about
Wow.
30 feet long.
When did Herb first set foot into Italy, and what were the circumstances?
Oh, this is a good one.
Do you remember?
Not too much, but it was a pretty common occurrence. The Pathfinder group, who knew where they were going, the only people in the airplanes who knew really where they were going, like GPS today, was used very extensively to drop spies and drop equipment, drop special people all over Europe. Although the war was going on, if you're 20 miles from the war, there was nothing going on. It's a little village. So if you evade the local gendarme, and they had enough contact to know where to put people. And they put me at a military base by an airdrop. And I didn't even know the name of the base. And they flew me out, yeah.
This was shocked because after he...
It's a very common thing during the war.
We were in Italy. Actually, I remember
We're doing the early work on air traffic control. And I had put together a concept of how to do it, and the Navy decided to try it out. And they were training pilots at Brigantine, New Jersey, and Atlantic City was the airfield. And the whole squadron sent up there to exercise. And I was teaching these aviators a little about air traffic control and how it runs. After 2 weeks or so, the course was over, and I was leaving. They had a big dinner for me, all the pilots. And I was given a book It was labeled, How to Save Your Hair. They opened up the book, it was hollow, and it said, put it in here.
What pranks did Herb pull while he was at MIT?
Oh, I'm glad we got to this one.
One about a car being taken apart and put back together. Yes! In a room. And then turning on.
The dormitories at MIT were 3 stories high, and they had a prank. We go in the men's room, which is all tile, and a basket, a waste paper basket, and they light the fire and open the window. Smoke would come out, and so people would call the fire department, and the firemen had to carry the hose all the way up the stairway to the 3rd floor. And by the time they got the hose up, there were people down at the bottom cutting the hose off in short pieces. And after a couple of these events, the word came down that everybody's going to have to pay for the hose that was destroyed. And so that stopped the event pretty quick. So we mailed the pieces of hose back to the fire department.
There were 2 other pranks though. There was one about the Austrian guy in his car.
Well, that was one I had nothing to do with, but they took a car and disassembled it and got it up to the roof of the tallest building at MIT, a big dome, and reassembled it. It was a Cambridge police car.
I thought there was one. There was a really wealthy guy who lived on your floor who like went to Austria for the weekend to go skiing.
He went home. He was a DuPont. He went home.
I remember another one with the guys. I didn't participate directly, but they got a truck from the Cambridge Works Department and an air drill, a compressor, and the whole bit. And they went out to Memorial Drive and set up barriers and started digging up the street. And they made a big hole and it disappeared.
Was there one about a cow?
Yeah.
There are all kinds of things.
There was one about a
Yeah, you're right. There
You
was
told
one
me-
about a cow that they put up on top of a
You told me that there was one about, you said, I remember you telling me when I was little that cows won't go downstairs.
Yeah, that's right.
So you brought
Got a cow up to the 3rd floor, and they couldn't get him down. They had to hoist him down.